I'd like to start, if you don't mind. This journey began, it began 5.5 years ago, but most recently in mid-October. Discussion opened with Tucker and the city on the location of their transmitting devices on the tower. It was learned, unfortunately, that for the 5-year period preceding that October, that while we had had a contract with Tucker, which called for them to pay $1,300 a month, they had never paid any money to be on the tower, and further were tapped into the city electrical system, and so we were not only getting no money for the tower use, but we're also paying their electrical bill. The discussion was that number was excessive. That telecom companies, that's a fairly normal kind of a dollar figure, that $13, $14, kind of $100 range a month. But if you were an IT company only, in Tucker's research, they continue to claim that a $250 number is a more national average. Our particular research suggested that a $500 to $700 number was not out of the ordinary, and so we commented back with them that we would like to work on a $600 a month makeup for the time that we had missed and move forward into the future, because the contract that we had was a 5-year renewable for, I think, 5 terms. That would have had Tucker paying about $37,800 to the city. In December, I guess in part because Tucker continued to claim that the 37 would simply bankrupt them, an alternate proposal was developed in which Tucker would pay about $20,000 back and go forward at about a $500 a month basis. That continued to languish for about another 2 months through some discussion, and Tucker at that point, a letter was sent to them in January that said we had no contract, they needed to remove their facilities in 30 days, as was called for in their contract with the city. At that point, Tucker hired an attorney to represent them, and we've been working with that attorney since that time. But I did get an email from Kevin that said he thought a fair offer would be a $250 payment back for 2.5 years. I'm not sure why he picked that amount of time. Let me make sure that was right. Or was that 4 years? And a $20 allowance for electrical. So his perception of what a fair deal would be an offer of about $8,460. And he also said that they needed to stay on, because they could not, this kind of weather, get off the tower in the 30 days. He wanted to stay on until April. Without any more in mind, and knowing or feeling personally that we weren't heading really toward a positive kind of resolution, I did offer that if they brought in a check for the $84.60 number, that would certainly suffice for staying on the tower, and I would bring it to the commission for their consideration.
Let me interrupt just for a moment. You extended an offer, and we're then going to look to bring it to the commission, correct?
I have authority to talk to companies and to bring negotiated opportunities to the commission, but I do not have the power in the purchasing ordinance or anywhere else to negotiate any contract that exceeds $5,000. So any any discussion that I have is conditional upon the commission voting their endorsement and ratification of any negotiations that I participate in.
And it was not with commission approval that you sent your February 6, 2013 communication to Mr. Tucker, correct?
It was not within the commission approval of any communication that I've had with Tucker on any basis.
All right, continue.
We did subsequent then get a certified check, a cashier's check from Tucker for the $8,460, which was handwritten on that this was the payment in full. We have not cashed that check on the advice of Eric Williams and others. We're still holding it pending commission action and this resolution today. I want to go ahead and say that it's always personally embarrassing, if nothing else, to recognize that that contracts are made at varying levels, and as sides part, there's an expectation that each side will honor the contracts that have been signed. The city has not always had, well, let me say it the other way, the city has 4 other companies that are on the tower, and after each of the contracts that have been negotiated with them, checks immediately came in and have continued to come in without the city sending invoices every month back and forth on payments. But we have not had, until very recently, the check and balance within our system that if somebody didn't pay that was contractually obligated, there was not a flagging system that was in place to pick that up. We have since instituted that kind of system, and I did put in front of your a table tonight a list of I think 23 or 24 routinely billed items, or could be billed items, that in the future, as contracts are signed, certainly will add to that number. And what will happen is that John will generate the semblance of a bill. We won't actually send it, but it will go into our system so that it will be there to be flagged. If money is not received, then at the end of the month we'll see that that bill remained unpaid, and we can make arrangements then to call the company or to send a bill as need be if somebody is delinquent for this kind of time.
Thank you, Mayor. The city has a claim, obviously, against Tucker for 5 years of rent under the contract. There were some protests or complaints about it or the amount of it, but you know, a written contract for that is enforceable on its face, and that amount is roughly 10 times the amount that's been offered. So there's an obvious deep discount being suggested or offered by Tucker. It's been characterized as an acceptance of Mr. Sober's offer, but it's really not how it works. But nevertheless, that's why the check has not been deposited or negotiated until the commission could weigh in and give direction to staff about whether the commission wants to accept that as a complete settlement payment or not. And we really need to give us some direction on which way you want to go. I've given you a recommendation to go ahead and accept it in complete discharge of the liability. There are several reasons for that. One is I think it's going to be an exercise in futility and frustration to try to collect the 80-some thousand from Tucker Communications. Sometimes the desire to prove a point legally is very important, and if the commission thinks that that point needs to be proved, then certainly we can sue. The city can, you can direct me, and the city can sue Tucker for the full amount. And we'll see how much is collected when the day is done, or when the litigation is done. I like to handle lawsuits. I'm not afraid of or bothered by the litigation. That's what I do. This is simply not one that seems to me is going to be highly rewarding to the city to pursue. It may turn out that the claim can be formally advanced. We can turn the money back over to, in effect, reject the money, give it back to Tucker and say, no, the city isn't going to accept it on the terms presented in full payment. Here it is, take your $84.60 back, and the city's going to go ahead and press for the collection of the full 80-some thousand and see where that takes us. That is a viable option. It simply isn't the one I recommended. And in part, I thought somebody had to step forward and assess it critically, even though it's a bad outcome on the surface. You know, face value, it's a bad outcome to accept $84.60 for 84,000, rough numbers. But my assessment of the situation is it's still going to be better for the city to take it and close the chapter with Tucker on those terms. I'm happy to accept direction otherwise. Don't take my recommendation differently. If the commission thinks it needs to prove the point of the contract and pursue collection of much more than the $8,460, then by all means tell me that and vote down the resolution to accept. And Tucker will know where they stand, and the city will know where it stands, and we'll go on to the collection process. There is the loose end of the Tucker equipment still on the city tower. So we're talking about capping liability at a fixed amount when they haven't vacated or left yet, which is a problem.
And doesn't the proposed resolution provide that if their equipment remains on, there could be additional rent charges?
It does.
Why is there an if?
Because
that
it's still
invites it
there.
to remain open.
It's simply because it's still there.
One of the enumerated duties of the city manager. Section 3.9, subparagraph D, is to assure that all terms and conditions imposed in favor of the city or its residents in any contract are faithfully kept and performed. The city charter further provides that it's the responsibility of the city attorney to file in the office of the city clerk all contracts and agreements entered into by the city, all papers constituting a part of that, together with the pertinent data and information concerning those. How it's gone since 2007 that no rent was collected or action taken deserves more answers than we're getting tonight, in light of the charter requirements imposed on two city officials to pay attention to those details. I'll have the discussions with Mr. Williams and Mr. Sobers. But that's not to excuse Tucker Communications from any responsibility it had, because unless it's claimed to be a forgery, Kevin L. Tucker, president of Tucker Communications, entered into this lease in 2007, eyes wide open.
And I can't speak to that because I was not involved with Tucker at that time. So.
Understood. So we can look on both sides of this equation for certain rights and responsibilities. I'll attend to my end. I will. But Tucker Communications has another side as well. And what I proposed in this resolution is a way to maybe find more communication, and with that, a better conclusion.